The lobby of Voss Capital was the kind of place that made you feel like you owed it an apology just for walking in. Marble floors. Not the fake kind, the real kind, the kind that's cold even in July, the kind that takes a full 30 seconds to warm up under your feet before it decides to tolerate you. The ceilings were maybe 40 feet high, which sounds impressive until you realize that what it actually does is make every person who walks under it feel approximately the size of a sugar packet. There were no art pieces on the walls, just the walls themselves, because the architect had decided that the walls were the art, and nobody had argued because nobody argues with a man who charges $400 an hour to tell you what your walls should look like. The whole building smelled like money. Not a good smell, not a bad smell, just that particular neutral, slightly aggressive scent of a place that has never once been worried about the electric bill. At 6:05 every morning, the lobby was empty, almost empty. There was a man. He was 67 years old, though you wouldn't have guessed it by the way he moved. Not young exactly, but deliberate, the way old craftsmen move, like every motion had been practiced until it cost nothing. He had big hands, the kind that look like they've done real work, the kind that carry their history in the knuckles. He wore the gray uniform of the building's maintenance staff, and the name on the chest pocket said simply, Crane. His name was Aldous Crane. Every morning, Aldous pushed a floor buffer across marble that did not need buffing. This was not his fault. The marble was cleaned properly every night by the evening crew. By 6 a.m. it was already spotless. Aldous knew this. He buffed it anyway, because Aldous was a man who believed that a thing worth doing was worth doing again, and because the sound of the machine, that low, steady hum, like a sleeping engine, was one of the few sounds in the world that asked nothing of him. He found this restful. He was not a man who required entertainment. He had long ago made peace with quiet. But on a Tuesday morning in November, Aldous Crane did something he had not done in 11 years. He stopped the buffer. He walked across the lobby, 40 feet of marble, each step soft in the silence, and he stood in front of the piano. It was a Yamaha Grand, black, lid closed. It sat in the east corner of the lobby, the way forgotten things sit, not absent exactly, but invisible, the way furniture becomes invisible when it stops being used. The corporate design firm that had arranged the lobby had placed it there for atmosphere, which is the interior design equivalent of buying a horse, because it looks nice in the yard and then never feeding it. The piano had not been played in 4 years. Nobody had told Aldous he couldn't play it. More importantly, and this was the thing about Aldous Crane, nobody had told him he could. He opened the lid. He sat down on the bench, which was 2 inches too low, and he didn't adjust it, because adjusting it would have meant spending another 30 seconds getting ready to do the thing instead of just doing the thing, and Aldous had no patience for the performance of preparation. He put his hands on the keys, and he played. Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. If you don't know this piece, here is what it sounds like. It sounds like someone is telling you something true about yourself that you weren't ready to hear, but in a way that's so gentle, you can't be angry about it. It sounds like the last good thing before a hard thing. It sounds like a Sunday evening in a house you no longer have access to. Aldous played it the way a man plays something he has played 10,000 times, not performing it, not showing it off, just wearing it, the way you wear a coat you've had for 20 years that fits better than anything you've bought since. His left hand held the bass notes like a man holding something fragile. His right hand let the melody breathe. He played for himself. He played for nobody. He played because music is one of the few things on earth that doesn't ask for your credentials before it lets you in, and Aldous Crane was tired of needing credentials. He was 2 minutes in when he heard the heels. The elevator doors opened at 6:17 a.m. every day. Not 6:16, not 6:18, 6:17, because the woman who stepped out of that elevator ran her life the way a surgeon runs an OR, with the kind of precision that isn't about control, it's about the terror of what happens without it. Her name was Mira Voss, CEO of Voss Capital, 44 years old. The kind of woman that made assistant managers straighten their ties without meaning to. The kind of woman that rooms rearranged themselves for. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white blouse, and both of them looked like they had been ironed while still on her body. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a way that said, "I have spent exactly 6 minutes on this, and it will not be discussed." She was carrying a coffee, one of those matte black cups from the place on 54th that charged $11 for a flat white, and she was not tasting it, because tasting it would have required slowing down, and Mira Voss had not slowed down in 11 years. She had 3 calls before 7 a.m. She had a merger vote at 10. She had a deputy who had texted her at 3:14 in the morning with the words, "We may have a problem," and then, because her deputy was the specific type of person who treats text messages like telegrams, nothing else. She was, in every measurable way, a woman with no available attention. She walked out of the elevator. She heard the piano. She stopped. Not because she decided to stop. Her legs stopped. Her legs made the decision independently, without consulting the rest of her, and by the time the rest of her caught up with what was happening, she had already been standing still for 4 full measures of Chopin. The music was coming from the east corner. She knew this piece. She knew it the way you know the smell of rain on a particular kind of pavement, in a particular city you haven't lived in since you were a child. She knew it in a place in her body that didn't have a name, somewhere between her sternum and her stomach, in the soft tissue that doesn't show up on any organizational chart and doesn't respond to authority. Her mother had played this piece. She didn't finish the thought. She stood in the middle of the lobby, $11 coffee in hand, and she listened, and for approximately 40 seconds she was not a CEO, and not a woman with 3 calls before 7 a.m., and not the daughter of a woman who had a piano in a house that no longer existed. Then the 40 seconds ended. Who told you that you could do that? Her voice was the voice she used in boardrooms, flat, carrying, the kind of voice that expects to be obeyed and has rarely been disappointed. Aldous Crane did not stop playing. This was something that almost never happened to Mira Voss. Not the not stopping. People didn't stop for a lot of reasons. They were busy. They hadn't heard. There was ambient noise. That was normal. What was not normal, what was specifically and almost offensively abnormal, was the quality of the not stopping. Aldous Crane had heard her. She could see from the slight adjustment in his shoulders that he had heard her. He simply had not stopped, and he had made the decision to not stop so completely, with such total absence of anxiety about it, that it was almost like watching a force of nature decline to answer a question, like asking the river why it's running east. Mira stood there. She should have walked to her office. She had a 10-second window before her 6:20 call. The call was with a man in Singapore who had precisely no patience for lateness, a man who had once hung up on a prime minister for being 40 seconds behind, a man who, Aldous reached a natural pause in the music. Not a stop, a breath, the place where the melody rests for a moment before continuing. He took his hands off the keys. He turned around on the bench, not all the way, just enough. "Nobody," he said. His voice was southern, not performed southern, not the kind of southern that gets put on for atmosphere. The real kind, the kind that settles into your vowels after 60 years of living in a particular place and has long since stopped caring whether you think it's charming. "Nobody told me I could read either," he said. He turned back to the piano. He waited. Mira opened her mouth. She closed it. Mira Voss had not been speechless since she was 14 years old, and she had made a private promise to herself on that specific birthday that she would never be speechless again, because silence, when you are not the one choosing it, is just another word for powerless. She was speechless. 40 feet of lobby between them, the hum of the building's ventilation system, the very faint sound of the city, muffled by 4 inches of glass. She walked to the nearest conference table. It was positioned just off the lobby, glass walls, meant for client waiting, and she pulled out a chair. A real pull, not the polite kind. The legs scraped against the marble with a sound that probably cost the floor something. She picked the chair up on the second scrape and carried it across the lobby and set it down next to the piano bench. She sat. "Again," she said, "not a request. Not exactly. The word that comes out when something has found the place in you that doesn't know how to be polite about what it needs." Aldous looked at her. Just looked. The kind of looking that takes a moment and means it. like he was reading something written in a language he recognized but hadn't spoken in a while. Then he turned back to the piano. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and he played again. This is the part where a different kind of story would make something happen. There would be a conversation, a revelation, an exchange of carefully selected personal details. The CEO would discover that the janitor had a fascinating past. The janitor would discover that the CEO had a secret vulnerability. They would connect, across the class divide, in the way that movies connect people, warmly, efficiently, with good lighting. This was not that story. What happened instead was nothing. She listened. He played. The building began filling up around 7:15. The first assistants, the junior analysts, the people who arrive early because they think arriving early is the same as being ahead. They passed through the lobby and they saw their CEO sitting next to the janitor while he played the piano, and they did what smart people do in situations they don't understand. They said nothing, they asked no questions, and they went to their desks and pretended they had not seen what they had seen. At 7:29, Aldous finished. Not stopped, finished. The piece came to its actual end, the way a story does when the person telling it respects you enough to actually end it, and not just trail off. He stood up, closed the piano lid, picked up his buffer, and went back to the marble. Mira sat there for another 40 seconds. Then she stood up, took her chair back to the conference table, placed it exactly as she had found it, and walked to her office. She did not say anything. Neither did he. She came back the next morning, 6:17, same time, same coffee, same blazer, different color, same kind of blazer. He was already playing when she walked in. She pulled the chair from the conference table without scraping it this time, and carried it across the lobby and sat down. She said nothing. He said nothing. She listened until 7:29. She left. This happened 9 times, 9 mornings, same chair, same corner. Sometimes he played Chopin. Once, the 4th morning, he played something she didn't recognize, something quieter and more complicated, and she almost asked what it was, and then didn't, because asking would have made it smaller somehow, would have turned it from a thing they were sharing into a thing she was requesting information about, and she didn't want information. She didn't want anything she could name. The 5th morning, 2 of the junior analysts set up near the glass conference room on purpose. They were pretending to review documents. Mira could see them in her peripheral vision, not looking at her, which is exactly what people look like when they are very intensely looking at you. She didn't say anything. The next day, facilities management received an email from her office. Terse, unsigned, 4 words. The East Corner. Private. Nobody sat near the glass conference room after that. The 6th morning was a Thursday. Aldous was 3 minutes into the nocturne when Mira said, without preamble, without warming up to it, without any of the normal social infrastructure that humans build around confessions, "My mother had a Steinway, in a house we lost. She said it the way you say something that you have been carrying for so long that your body has stopped distinguishing between the weight of it and the weight of yourself. She said it looking straight ahead, not at him, not at the piano, at nothing in particular." Aldous played 4 more measures. He said. That was all he said, and this was the thing that would have been incomprehensible to anyone who knew Mira Voss professionally. That was enough. More than enough. That one sound, with all the weight he packed into it, was the most complete response she had received to that sentence in 30 years. Including from the therapist she'd seen for 6 months in 2019, who had nodded very caringly and said things like, "And how did that make you feel?" as if feelings were things that came in labeled boxes. She didn't explain further. He didn't ask. They sat in that together, the way you can only sit with certain kinds of quiet if you've both earned your seat at the table. The 7th morning she arrived at 6:12, 5 minutes early. She had not been 5 minutes early to anything social in her adult life. She stood by the East Corner, coffee in hand, piano lid still down, and she waited for Aldous to finish with the buffer, and it occurred to her while she was waiting that she had no idea what she was doing here, and it further occurred to her that this was, in its own strange way, the most rested she had felt in 11 years. Aldous opened the lid, looked at her chair, which she had already placed next to the bench, said nothing about it, played. The 8th morning, she asked. She had been building to it for 2 days, the way you build to something you're not sure you have the right to ask, rolling it over in your mind, finding the angle that doesn't sound like prying. She gave up trying to find the right angle. How did you learn? She asked. He finished the phrase he was in the middle of, set his hands in his lap. Scholarship, he said. Conservatory. Cincinnati. Pause. Then Korea. Another pause. Then after Korea. 3 sentences. The third one was not really a sentence. It was a door, and behind the door was a room, and the room was not one he was opening, and Mira Voss, who had, over the course of the past 8 mornings, discovered a patience in herself she had not previously known she possessed, did not try to open it. You could have, she started. She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence, because she realized, halfway through, that it was a rude sentence. The kind of sentence that assumes it knows what someone's life was supposed to look like. Could have, Aldous agreed, in a tone that was not bitter at all, which was somehow worse than if it had been. He turned back to the piano. She sat with the silence that the unfinished sentence made. The 9th morning was a Friday. Mira had slept 3 hours. She didn't sleep less than 5 hours normally. She was disciplined about sleep the way she was disciplined about everything, because she had learned early that a body, like a company, runs badly when it's exhausted. But the night before the 9th morning had been a night with a 3 a.m. text from her deputy that said, "We may have a problem with the sole investors." And a problem with the sole investors was not a problem you slept through, so she had not slept through it. She walked out of the elevator at 6:17 looking exactly like herself, which was the thing about Mira Voss that her executive team respected and also found slightly unnerving. She looked the same at 3 hours of sleep as she did at 8, and you never knew if that was discipline or armor or both. Aldous was already playing. He had started earlier that day, 6:05, and he was deep into it when she came in, deep into a nocturne she had not heard him play before, slower than the others, more patient, the kind of piece that settles into you instead of moving you. She sat. She put the coffee on the floor next to her chair because she had stopped needing to hold it, had stopped needing the armor of the thing in her hand. She sat and she listened, and the music moved through the lobby the way good music moves, not filling the room but opening it. 3 minutes in, she said, "If you play Chopin, I'll marry you." She said it the way things come out after 9 days of a particular kind of closeness. Not thinking about it first, not editing it, just letting it arrive in the air. It was a joke, and it was not a joke. It was the kind of thing you say when something has gotten through the gate, and you don't know how, and you don't have a sentence for what actually happened, so you say the closest true thing instead. The music stopped, not slowed down, not tapered. Stopped. This had never happened before, not in 9 mornings. He had always either played to a natural pause or played to the end. He had never just stopped. The lobby was very quiet. Aldous turned on the bench, all the way around this time. He looked at her with the same inventory look, the look that was reading something underneath what was visible, and she sat very still and let herself be read because, and this was the thing she would not have told anyone, it had been a long time since she had let anyone look at her like that. Really look, not at the CEO, at the person. He said, "Mrs. Voss." She waited. "I already have a wife." The words were simple, completely simple, the kind of sentence a child could understand. He let them sit. Then, 51 years. Something left her face. Not grief, exactly. Not embarrassment. She was not embarrassed, because she understood immediately that the sentence she had said was not a proposal, not really, and Aldous understood that too, and neither of them was confused about what had just happened. What left her face was something she didn't have a word for. The nearest word was holding, like she had been holding something, braced against something, and the thing she was braced against had turned out to be made of something softer than she'd thought, and the bracing could stop now. She looked at the piano. Then, 51 years. She said it back, not as a question but as a repetition, the way you repeat something when you are processing its weight. "Yes, ma'am." A pause. "Is she—" Mira started. Still, he said, before she could finish. Yes. Still. What a word for it. Still meaning alive, yes, but also still meaning present, still meaning here, still meaning after 51 years, still. Mira nodded once. The kind of nod that is not agreement but arrival, like she had just landed somewhere after a long trip. Does she know? She asked. He looked at her. That you play like that, she said. The smile that crossed Aldous Crane's face then was a particular kind of smile. The kind you earn over a long time. The kind that has been tested by enough bad years that it means something. The way a scar means something. Not because of the hurt but because of what grew back over it. She's the reason, he said. She's the reason. 3 words. 3 words that took 2 sentences and compressed them into nothing and contained everything. That the music was not his alone. That it had been made possible by another person. That 51 years of a particular kind of love had not dulled the thing but deepened it. That the man sitting on that piano bench had spent half a century being someone's reason and someone else's music, and that those 2 things were the same thing. Mira Voss, who had built a company from $40,000 in a borrowed desk, who had negotiated 8-figure deals in rooms where she was the only woman and had made those rooms hers, who had not cried at her own mother's funeral because she had decided that the cost of crying in public was greater than the grief, who had filed the feelings under later and then forgotten which cabinet she'd put them in. Mira Voss sat very still. She was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up her coffee from the floor, stood up, looked at Aldous Crane once more, and said, "Thank you. Not for the music, not for the conversation, not for any specific thing, just, thank you. The kind you say when someone has given you something that doesn't fit in any category." She walked to her office. She had a merger vote in 4 hours. She was ready for it. The merger passed. The sole investors were handled. Not easily, but handled. The 3 a.m. text slowed down. November became December, became the new year with all the things that new years contain, and the lobby of Voss Capital kept doing what lobbies do, which is mostly just standing there looking impressive while other people have lives inside it. And every morning, at 6:05, Aldous Crane opened the piano. The lid stayed open now. He had started leaving it up when he finished, because it felt wrong to put it back down, like closing a window in good weather. Facilities management noticed and put in a request to Mira's office asking whether the lid should be closed when the piano wasn't in use, for aesthetic consistency with the lobby's design profile. Mira left a reply on the request. 4 words. Leave it. Mira Voss. The lid stayed open. There's a thing that happens, sometimes, when 2 people spend enough mornings in the same quiet together. It isn't friendship exactly. It isn't mentorship or connection in any way that you could put on a form or explain to HR. It doesn't have a category, which is probably why it doesn't happen often, because people are generally uncomfortable with things that don't have categories. What it is this: 2 people finding out that they are both still capable of being surprised by something and then sitting together in the surprise without needing to do anything about it. Mira had forgotten she was still capable of that. She had forgotten it the way you forget things that aren't urgent. Slowly, without noticing, the way a habit becomes invisible once it's been gone long enough. The mornings gave it back. She didn't know how to say that, and she didn't try to. Mira Voss was, at her core, a woman who believed that the attempt to put certain things into language damaged them, the way handling a moth's wing leaves a print on the dust that can't be undone. So she didn't put it into language. She just showed up at 6:17, sat down, and listened. Some mornings they talked. Not much, not about anything important, or not anything that would look important from the outside. Aldous mentioned once that his wife's hands had started hurting in the cold. He said it while adjusting the piano bench. Just said it, the way you mention something that is living in you that day. Mira said nothing. The next week, she stopped by facilities and asked if the building could adjust the heating schedule to start earlier on cold mornings, and she gave a reason that had to do with the pipes. Not because she couldn't have given the real reason, but because the real reason wasn't anyone else's to hold. Some mornings they didn't talk at all. Those were the best ones. On the morning that the year turned 3 months old, Aldous played the E-flat Nocturne, her mother's piece. He played it all the way through, from the beginning to the exact end, and he played it the way it is supposed to be played, not showing off, not demonstrating, just giving it the space it requires, the full length of it, every phrase given its breath. Mira stood at the lobby window while he played, not in her chair, standing, coffee in hand, facing the street, watching the city do its early morning thing, the delivery trucks, the people with collars turned up, the yellow taxis in the gray light. She didn't turn around during the piece. When it ended, she didn't say anything. He didn't either. She set the coffee on the windowsill. After a while, she said, she played it slower. Aldous thought about this. Most people do, he said. She thought that was the right way. She wasn't wrong. Mira looked at the street. No, she said, she wasn't. Here is what is true. This story does not end with a grand gesture or a lesson wrapped in a bow. It ends the way real things end, which is that they don't really end, they just become part of the texture of an ordinary morning. Aldous Crane is still a janitor at Voss Capital. This is not a tragedy. He has a uniform that fits, a buffer that hums at exactly the right frequency, marble that doesn't need buffing and gets buffed anyway, and a piano with the lid up in the east corner that is waiting for him every morning the way good things wait, not impatiently, not demanding, just present. He plays until 7:29. He has a wife of 51 years, 52 now, whose hands hurt in the cold and who still laughs at things she's heard 100 times, and who has always known, the way certain people know, that the music her husband carries didn't start with him, that it was always looking for a place to go, and he was the place it found, and she was the reason he kept going. Mira Voss arrives at 6:17. Some mornings she sits, some mornings she stands by the window, some mornings she takes calls. You can see her in the corner of the lobby, phone pressed to her ear, walking slow circles and listening to the piano at the same time, the way a person can hold two things at once if they practice. She never told anyone what she said on the 9th morning. Not her deputy, not her executive team, not the friend she has dinner with on the 3rd Friday of every month who knows most things about her life. She kept it. It belongs in the category of things that cost you something to say, and the fact that it cost something is why it was worth saying, and the fact that the answer came back the way it did, 51 years, is why she is able, now, on the mornings when the merger votes are close and the sole investors are restless and the 3 a.m. texts come in, to sit down in a chair that she carries across 40 feet of expensive marble and listen to a man play Chopin and feel, in some part of herself that has no title and no seat at any table, that things are actually all right, not fixed, all right. There is a junior analyst who started at Voss Capital in March, fresh out of school, 24 years old, the kind of eager that makes veteran staff gently tired. His first week, he came in at 6:30 and heard the piano, and he followed it to the east corner, and he saw the CEO of the company sitting next to the janitor, while the janitor played Chopin, and he stood there for a moment not sure what he was seeing. Mira Voss looked at him. He took 3 steps back. He thought about asking someone about it. He thought about mentioning it to his supervisor. He drafted a text to a friend from his program that began, "Okay, so the weirdest thing," and then he didn't send it. Because, and he couldn't have told you exactly why, it seemed like the wrong thing to describe. Like describing it would reduce it to something smaller than what it was. Like whatever was happening in that corner of the lobby every morning was the kind of thing that only works if you don't try to explain it. He deleted the draft. He went to his desk. The next morning he came in at 6:15, made himself a coffee, and sat at his desk, which happened to have a line of sight to the east corner if you turned your chair at a specific angle, and he worked, or he appeared to work, and sometimes he heard the music, and sometimes he didn't, depending on the ambient noise of the building, and on the days he heard it, he found that he worked a little better, though he couldn't have said why that was either. He stopped trying to explain things that didn't need explaining. The marble floor still doesn't need buffing. Aldous buffs it anyway. The piano lid stays open. Every morning at 6:05 the music starts, and it fills the 40-foot ceilings of a lobby that was designed to make people feel small, and it does something to the air in that room that no architect planned for and no interior design firm could have budgeted for. And at 6:17, heels on marble, coffee in hand, a woman who has made herself out of harder material than most people ever have to touch, walks in and stops, and listens, and for the length of a Chopin nocturne, she is just a person. That's it. That's the whole thing. The answer that left her speechless was not the answer she thought she was getting. She thought she was going to hear no one, or sorry, or some version of the explanation that people give when they're doing something they know is a little beyond their station, that shuffling apology that people perform when they're caught doing something beautiful in a place that hasn't given them permission. She heard 51 years instead. And the thing about 51 years is this. It is not just an answer to the question she asked. It is an answer to every question she has been asking, some of them out loud, and some of them only in the space between 3 a.m. and morning, for a very long time. It says, this is what it looks like when something lasts. It says, you don't have to own a thing to be made by it. It says, the music doesn't need your credentials. The music doesn't need your title, or your merger, or your $11 coffee. The music just needs you to sit down. She sat down. She kept sitting down. That's the whole story.